Ever catch yourself thinking, what made Steve Jobs Steve Jobs? Well, we're going to find out. Today's deep dive, you ready for this? We're going inside the mind of a tech icon.
Okay.
Using Walter Isaacson's biography to kind of uncover the man behind, Apple's sleek designs and those groundbreaking products.
Yeah.
Forget like those product launch keynotes for a second.
Right.
This isn't about specs, okay? This is about character. We're talking about junkyard influences, psychedelic explorations, and that like legendary drive that made, the impossible happen.
It's so interesting how all those seemingly like unrelated experiences, they all come together to just paint this picture of Jobs.
Right.
Like each piece, I don't know, from like scavenging for parts to Zen meditation, it's like they all contributed to his unique perspective on technology, on business.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. Okay, let's unpack this. So Jobs' story, it starts with his adoption into this, working class family in California.
Okay.
Now, I know what you're thinking. Typical bio stuff, right? But stay with me. Okay. So Jobs' father, Paul, he was a mechanic who loved tinkering, especially with cars. But it was more than just a hobby, though, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Those weekend trips to the junkyard weren't just about, finding spare parts. Imagine young Steve, right? Tagging along with his dad, learning to haggle, learning to get a good price, just seeing the value in things that other people just overlook. Like, those were really formative experiences, I think, for him.
Yeah.
They instilled in him this, like, sense of resourcefulness
Yeah.
and this knack for spotting potential where others just didn't.
Totally. Yeah, it's like those trips sparked this like lifelong love of a good deal.
Oh, yeah.
And this knack for maximizing what you've got. In fact, Isaacson even mentions that Jobs' college fund, it came from his dad buying these like beat up cars, fixing them up, and then selling them for a profit.
Exactly. And, that just speaks to this certain scrappiness, this like get your hands dirty mentality that, it really became a hallmark of that early Apple like ethos.
Yeah.
But it wasn't just about, practicality.
No.
There was also an artistic sensibility that was developing at the same time.
Oh, absolutely. And this is key, right? Because Jobs' family, they lived in a home designed by Joseph Eichler,
Okay.
and they were known for their clean, minimalist aesthetic. And get this, he credits those homes with influencing Apple's design philosophy.
Wow. It's incredible to think that something as simple as the design of your childhood home can have such a profound impact later in life.
I know, right? And he even said, and this is a direct quote, Eichler did a great thing. His houses were smart and cheap and good. They brought clean design and simple taste to lower income people.
Wow.
Like, Eichler proved that good design, it didn't have to be exclusive or expensive.
And that idea that beauty and functionality weren't, mutually exclusive, that stayed with Jobs.
Totally.
And you can see it reflected in, like, the original Macintosh's all-in-one design, and then later in products like the iPod even.
Yeah, totally. And it wasn't just design. This guy was like a tech whiz from, day one. Okay, picture this. 12-year-old Jobs,
Yeah.
he needs parts for this frequency counter he's building. What does he do?
What?
He looks up Bill Hewlett, the founder of HP, in the phone book.
No way.
Yes.
He didn't.
And he calls him.
He calls Bill Hewlett.
Most kids would be too intimidated, not Jobs. Not only does he get the parts, but he also impressed Hewlett enough to land a summer job at HP.
Wow, I can barely get a hold of customer service these days, and he's out there cold calling tech legends.
I know, right? It's unbelievable.
That's amazing.
But this story, it perfectly captures Jobs' audacity, his like unwavering belief in himself,
Yeah.
and this willingness to just go after what he wanted, even if it meant reaching out to a complete stranger.
That's amazing.
But Jobs' path to, innovation, it wasn't linear. He famously drops out of Reed College.
Right.
But instead of leaving entirely, he kind of hangs around, audits classes that, I don't know, pique his interest, like
Yeah.
calligraphy, which, by the way, would later inspire the Mac's multiple typefaces.
I did not know that.
It's like he just had this instinct for what was going to be important later on.
Yeah, and this period in his life, I think it reveals a lot about his approach to learning.
Oh.
He was not afraid to forge his own path, to follow his curiosity wherever it led him, even if it meant straying from that, traditional academic track. And, within that exploration, he kind of dives headfirst into this whole counterculture.
And I'm not just talking about tie-dye shirts here, okay? Jobs' experimentation with LSD and this deep dive into Zen Buddhism, these weren't just youthful dalliances.
Right.
These were profound experiences that really shaped his worldview.
Yeah, and he saw LSD as a way to expand his consciousness, to see the world from this, different perspective.
Right.
In fact, Isaacson quotes Jobs as saying that LSD showed him that there was another side to the coin, and you can't remember it when you come back, but you know it.
Wow.
He really believed that this experience heightened his creativity and just encouraged him to think outside the box.
Interesting. And then there's Zen Buddhism with its emphasis on simplicity, mindfulness, intuition.
Right.
These principles resonated really deeply with Jobs.
They did, and their influence can be seen throughout his entire career.
Right.
You can see Zen principles in his approach to design, his pursuit of this minimalist aesthetic, and even in his management style.
Interesting.
It's so fascinating how these seemingly disparate experiences, right? Psychedelic exploration and this disciplined meditation, they kind of combine to shape his unique approach.
Yeah. Yeah, it's like he took, I don't know, the best of both worlds, right? The mind-expanding experimentation of that counterculture, but also the disciplined focus of Zen, and he blended them into his own kind of unique approach to technology and business.
Yeah, and it wasn't just Jobs. The Bay Area's counterculture ethos, especially in the 70s, it played a huge role in shaping the early tech industry as a whole. This wasn't just about peace and love. It was about challenging the status quo, embracing individuality, and this idea of viewing technology as this tool for personal liberation.
Right, yeah. It's like they were taking those big impersonal machines that only huge corporations and governments used to use and saying, hey, what if we put the power of computing into the hands of everyday people?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Think about the impact of publications like, the Whole Earth Catalog, which Jobs considered a Bible.
Oh, yeah.
It championed this whole DIY spirit, this belief in empowering individuals through access to tools and information.
And that idea of tools for human use that really resonated with Jobs.
Totally, yeah. It became a core principle in his vision for personal computing.
Yeah.
It's actually really interesting to see how these counterculture ideals sort of intersected with the rise of personal computers to challenge the established order and democratize technology,
Okay, so let's talk about the birth of Apple.
Okay.
It all starts in that, legendary garage. Right.
But what's so striking is that Jobs, he wasn't initially driven purely by profits.
Right.
What really fired him up was this idea of having a company, building something with Wozniak.
Oh, absolutely. And you can really sense that youthful enthusiasm,
Yeah.
Isaacson highlights this quote where Jobs tells Wozniak, even if we lose our money, we'll have a company. For once in our lives, we'll have a company. And it speaks volumes about their mindset at the time.
It wasn't about the money. It was the thrill of creation.
Totally.
The camaraderie, this kind of shared mission. I mean, the financial success that came later.
Exactly, yeah.
But, you can't tell the Apple story without talking about the partnership itself.
Right.
Wozniak, he was the engineering genius, right?
Yeah.
He could bring Jobs' ideas to life.
Yeah.
And Jobs was the visionary, the marketing whiz. He could sell those ideas to the world. They were the perfect match.
Oh, yeah. They were a classic example of how a, complementary partnership can lead to such extraordinary things.
In fact, Isaacson tells a great story about them. Illustrates their dynamic perfectly. So Jobs convinced Wozniak to develop the game Breakout for Atari in 4 days.
Okay.
And he's like, we'll split the fee, right?
Okay.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Jobs didn't tell Wozniak that there was a bonus for using fewer chips.
Oh.
And so when Atari paid up, Jobs kept the bonus for himself.
Wow.
And, this incident has been the subject of a lot of debate. Even Wozniak himself later admitted that he felt a little hurt by it. But, it really just highlights Jobs' relentless drive, his laser focus on, the bottom line.
Yeah.
Which sometimes came at the expense of his personal relationships, unfortunately.
Okay, so we can't talk about Steve Jobs without addressing, the elephant in the room,
Right.
Or rather the field in the room. I'm talking about Jobs' famous reality distortion field.
Oh, yeah.
This wasn't just charisma. This was a superpower.
It is.
His ability to make people believe the impossible was possible.
It's true. And one of the best explanations I've ever heard for it is from Bud Tribble, who's an early Apple engineer. And he told a new recruit, he's like, Steve has a reality distortion field.
Wow.
Think of it like a force field that makes the impossible seem achievable.
Right.
But just while you're in Jobs' presence.
Yeah. Yeah. And the book is full of stories about Jobs using this field to push his team to achieve these incredible feats.
Oh,
Like the time he insisted that the Macintosh software had to be finished in a week,
oh, wow.
even though everyone told him that's impossible.
It can't be done.
It can't be done.
What happened?
They did it.
They pulled it off.
Fueled by Jobs' unwavering belief, countless cups of coffee, sheer willpower.
It's amazing. This is like a perfect example of the power of vision, even if that vision was, fueled by a little bit of delusion and a healthy disregard for the word no.
I was going to say, and a complete disregard for any kind of reality or obstacle. It's amazing what people can accomplish when they're convinced they can do it.
It's true. And another defining characteristic of Jobs was his obsession with design.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm not just talking about making things look pretty. Jobs believed that simplicity is the ultimate sophistication.
Right.
This wasn't just a, marketing tagline for him. It was like a core philosophy that permeated every fiber of Apple's products, from the elegant lines of the Macintosh to the intuitiveness of the user interface.
We'll go for sure.
Everything.
He was famous for being incredibly hands-on with design.
Oh, yeah.
Like, every detail mattered to him.
Every little thing.
Down to, the title bars on Macintosh Windows.
Oh, yeah. There's a great story about Chris Espinosa, who was an early Apple engineer.
Yeah.
And he was tasked with designing a calculator.
Okay.
For the Macintosh.
Okay.
Yeah. And day after day, Jobs would critique it, demanding these changes, until Espinosa, in a moment of pure genius, I think, created the Steve Jobs roll-your-own-calculator construction set.
Wait, what?
It was a program that allowed Jobs to customize every single aspect of the calculator's design himself.
He needed that control over every pixel.
Every single one.
It's hilarious and terrifying at the same time.
I know.
It's no wonder people found him so difficult to work with.
Yeah, it's true. While his, obsessive attention to detail, it could be frustrating for his team.
Yeah.
It was also instrumental in Apple's success.
Mm-hmm.
It's what set their products apart from everyone else.
Right.
It made them feel more refined, more thoughtfully designed than anything else on the market.
Totally.
And that's because of Jobs.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here, from Jobs' early influences and the birth of Apple to his reality distortion field, his obsession with design.
Yeah, it's a lot.
But we haven't even touched on his dramatic exit from Apple, the founding of NXT, his triumphant return, and then his later years as this, tech visionary.
Right.
It's the story just keeps getting more and more unbelievable.
It really is a fascinating journey. And in the next part of our deep dive, we're going to explore how those experiences shaped not just Steve Jobs, but the tech landscape as we know it today.
Okay, so last time we left off with Jobs, riding high, back at the helm of Apple after his time at NXT.
Right.
But we know the story doesn't end there. And what's so captivating about this part of his life is how it's this blend of incredible triumph, almost Shakespearean in its scope, but also intertwined with these really personal struggles.
Yeah, it's the classic hero's journey, isn't it? Jobs returns from exile, and not just to his former glory, but to kind of lead Apple into this whole new era of just dominance.
Right.
He streamlines their product line. He brings in Joni Ive, and they launch the iMac, a computer that was both, technologically advanced and undeniably cool.
Oh, totally. Who could forget those translucent candy-colored cases?
I know, right?
It was he injected this dose of pure joy back into personal computing. But it wasn't just about aesthetics, was it?
No, absolutely not.
Jobs also understood how important it was to craft this really compelling brand story.
For sure. And think about the Think Different ad campaign.
Oh, yeah.
It wasn't just about selling computers. It was about aligning Apple with creativity, with innovation.
Right.
This idea of challenging the status quo by, featuring all these iconic figures like Einstein and Gandhi.
Mm-hmm.
Jobs positioned Apple as this brand for the people who dared to see the world differently.
It was genius marketing. And it worked.
Oh, yeah.
Apple was back on top. But like you mentioned, this period of success, this is also when Jobs is, facing his own mortality.
Right.
He's diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, undergoes surgery, treatment. And it's hard to imagine the resilience it must have taken to kind of keep pushing forward with that kind of weight on his shoulders.
Absolutely. And yet he seemed more driven than ever.
I know. It's incredible.
And this is where we kind of see Jobs' love of music sort of intersecting with his vision for Apple's future.
Oh.
He'd always been this huge Bob Dylan fan.
Okay.
Even had this like bootleg Dylan CD that became this kind of like talisman for him.
Wait, what was on this bootleg?
So it had these like alternate takes of Strawberry Fields Forever and other tracks. And Jobs was so obsessed with like the rawness and the process that it revealed. Like it embodied this idea of like creative evolution, of striving for perfection, even in the face of imperfection, you know.
Wow.
And you can see that same philosophy reflected in like the iPod and the vision behind the iTunes store.
It wasn't just about selling this like gadget. It was about curating this whole musical experience, right?
That's right.
Bringing 1,000 songs to your pocket.
Exactly. And to do that, he had to like convince a very skeptical music industry to kind of embrace digital downloads.
Oh, my bad.
Can you imagine being like a record executive back then?
Yeah, they must have.
The idea of letting people buy individual songs online instead of like whole albums
Right.
must have seemed terrifying.
Of course.
But you know what? Jobs, being Jobs, he somehow convinces them to take the leap.
How?
He had this way of like painting this picture of the future
Yeah.
that was so compelling, so irresistible that people just, they couldn't help but get on board.
Wow.
And what's remarkable is that it was this like win-win situation. Consumers loved the convenience, the affordability of the iTunes store.
Yeah.
And, you know, the music industry, they found this new way to connect with fans in like the digital age.
It's true.
Oh.
Okay, so we've got the iMac, the iPod, the iTunes store.
Right.
But of course, the biggest game changer was yet to come. The iPhone.
Oh, yeah. And it's here where we really see Jobs' philosophy of this like closed ecosystem of controlling every aspect of the user experience really come to the forefront. He understood that to create this like truly seamless and intuitive product, you had to control both the hardware and the software.
Right. And the App Store, that became this huge part of that vision.
Huge. With the App Store, Jobs essentially created this like curated garden for apps.
Okay.
It ensured that they met Apple's, you know, high standards for quality, for design. Of course, this approach had its critics
Right.
who argued that, you know, it stifled innovation, it limited consumer choice. But there's just no denying that it contributed to the iPhone's like phenomenal success.
It's true. The iPhone's interface was so intuitive.
Oh, yes.
So user-friendly.
Totally.
It like changed the way we interact with technology.
It did.
And the App Store, it created this whole new ecosystem for developers, entrepreneurs, everybody.
Absolutely.
But it wasn't all, you know, smooth sailing.
Well, there was AntennaGate, right? Where the iPhone 4's antenna design, it led to all those dropped calls.
Oh, yeah.
And Jobs' initial response to that criticism was, you know, classic Jobs, defensive, dismissive.
Right.
This incident, along with others, you know, it highlighted some of the downsides of his, like, controlling nature, his unwavering belief in his own vision.
Right.
But even his critics, you know, even they couldn't deny the impact that he had.
So as we kind of reach the end of our deep dive here, what are your final thoughts? What's like the biggest takeaway from Steve Jobs's, you know, complex, often contradictory life?
I think for me, it's the power of like unwavering belief. Jobs, he believed in his vision so fiercely, so completely, that it was like he could bend reality to his will.
Yeah.
You know? He taught us that anything is possible if you have the audacity to dream big, the tenacity to pursue your goals like relentlessly, and the willingness to just challenge conventions.
It's that reality distortion field in action, right?
Totally.
But, you know, it's also important to remember that his success, it wasn't just about force of personality.
Right.
Jobs had this deep understanding of design,
He did.
a passion for simplicity, and this like uncanny ability to kind of anticipate what consumers wanted before they even knew they wanted it, you know?
It's true.
He was a visionary, a showman, and a ruthless perfectionist who changed the world in ways, I don't know, both profound and mundane, right?
Absolutely.
And whether you loved him or loved to hate him, there's no denying that Steve Jobs left this like indelible mark on our technological landscape, you know, one that continues to shape how we live, work, and interact with the world around us.
Absolutely.
He certainly left us with a lot to think about. So what do you think? Was Jobs this visionary genius, or was he this like control-obsessed tyrant? Or maybe a complicated mix of both.
Right.
As you continue to kind of explore his legacy, you know, consider the impact of his leadership style, his unwavering commitment to his vision.
Totally.
Because it's a story that continues to, like, spark debate
They got it.
and, inspire innovation, even
Yeah.
all these years after his passing. It's pretty amazing.